It was Kṣemendra, the 11th century Sanskrit theoretician, who made the concept of Aucitya, in fact, a separate body of knowledge in literary science through his famous treatise titled Aucityavicāracarā. In Aucityavicāracarā, Kṣemendra sees Aucitya as the eternal life force of kāvya. He compares a poem that does not conform to the standards of propriety to an unruly person who has worn ornaments in improper places, and he has consequently become a butt of ridicule. Kṣemendra says, an embellishment is a real embellishment if applied at the proper place. Merits are always real merits when they are not divested of propriety. Put at a proper place, ornaments could beautify, otherwise they do not even deserve to be called ornaments. Similarly, merits, if they do not fall short of propriety, are merits, otherwise they are blemishes. Who does not suffer mockery by putting on the girdle string around the neck, the radiant necklace around the waist, the anklets on hands, the bracelets on feet, and by showing might against the prostrated and compassion towards foes? Similarly, neither figures of speech nor the merits look charming without propriety. Bhanudatta in his Rasa Tarangani states that impropriety must by all means be carefully avoided. According to him, there is nothing that destroys rasa more than impropriety. He sees one's adherence to canons of propriety as the priceless secret of rasa. All these observations show that in the tradition of Sanskrit Kavya Shastra, the notion of Aucitya was a central concern. It should also be borne in mind that anaucitya or impropriety was not absolutely unacceptable in Kavya. In the case of degenerate characters or Athama characters like Ravana, impropriety was very much acceptable. Creative writers often employed the element of impropriety, especially that of the inferior characters, as the way to juxtapose them against the law-abiding noble characters. Pollock, in his article The Social Aesthetics of Sanskrit Literary Theory, points out that the presence of impropriety as such does not enfeeble literature, as if since the sole aim of literature is rasa, when real rasa is not present, the true aim of literature is not attained. How, after all, could one have the Ramayana without Ravana? An important thing that we need to keep in our mind is that anaucitya or impropriety is not a nitya dosha or eternal fault. Scholars as early as Bhamaha had pointed out that anaucitya is not something that is totally undesirable in poetry. Bhamaha's discussion in this respect happens in the chapter 4 of his Kāvya-alankāra when he discusses the Kāvya dosha called punarukti. Punarukti or tautology is the saying of the same thing over and over again in different words. Considering the fact that it results in boredom, creative writers and literary theoreticians opine that punarukti is a dosha and should be avoided from poetry. But Bhamaha points out that although punarukti is usually considered a poetic blemish or poetic fault, it is very much acceptable in the representation of emotions such as fear, jealousy, etc. He says, Dandin also holds the same view. In the 4th chapter of his Kavyadarsha, Dandin says that apartha or incoherent argument is generally considered a poetic fault, but it becomes a guna or poetic merit in portraying the raving of a madman or a child's prattle or the speech of a person who is totally sick. Similarly, Dandin shows the vyabhichara or the exception to all doshas. He is fully aware of the fact that the realm of poetry, a certain thing is not dosha by its very nature. Dandin's observation in this respect is very interesting. He says, Rudrada even goes to the extent of saying that almost all kinds of poetic flows become poetic merits when occasions need the imitation of these poetic flows. While representing the character of a mentally deranged person, the employment or use of nonsense becomes inevitable. Namasindhu, the commentator of Rudrada's Kāvya explains this point further. He says that when one portrays the character of a speaker who is not at all good at speaking, all the poetic faults turn out to be poetic merits. To explain his point, he cites the instance of the funny description of the illiterate husband of the poetess Vikata who is unable to pronounce properly. Anandavartana also holds that the idea of anauchitya or impropriety is anitya or impermanent. For example, he opines that the dosha called shrudidushta or the employment of harsh words will become a guna in the case of emotions like raudra rasa or the aesthetic emotion of rage. Bhoja calls these kinds of doshas, that is doshas that can turn out to be gunas, dosha gunas or vaisheshika gunas. The literary critic J. E. Spingarn's observation in his essay Seven Arts and the Seven Confusions about the relative status of poetic or literary demerits is worth quoting here. It is unconceivable that a modern thinker should still adhere to the abstractness of good expression, when it is obvious that we can only tell whether it is good or bad when we see it in its natural context. Is any word artistically bad in itself? Is not ain't an excellent expression when placed in the mouth of an illiterate character in a play or story? It is also important to note that what is considered Aucitya today can become Anaucitya tomorrow. A case in point is the observation of Jagannatha about Draupadi having 5 husbands. According to the Prachinas or ancients, a woman having multiple female partners was not a case of rasabhasa if she is married to them. But for Navyas like Jagannatha, this is a clear case of rasabhasa. Therefore, he says that Draupadi's love for her 5 husbands, unlike what his predecessors think, is a clear case of rasabhasa. Distancing himself from the old school and calling himself Navya or new, Jagannatha declares, here Draupadi's love for her husbands is an instance of rasabhasa or semblance of rasa. This is the view of the new intelligentsia. But the ancient scholars do not see this instance of a heroine feeling love for her multiple partners as a case of rasabhasa. Another case in point is the observation of Anandavartana about the scene in the 8th Sarga of Kalidasa's Kumara Sambhava, which was generally considered by many critics to be obscene because it portrayed the physical intimacy between Shiva and Parvati. But Anandavartana exonerates Kalidasa of this charge, since this scene, Ananda argues, does not appear as vulgarity because the elements of vulgarity are concealed by his skill. A modern example would be D.H. Lawrence's Lady Chatterley's Lover. It was thought to be unfit for respectable society because of the profusion of the 4-letter words, and it was considered culpable obscenity in England in the 1920s when the novel was published. But now the novel is read with much enthusiasm by the modern readers. So, in this lecture, we have been seeing the opinion of various Sanskrit literary theoreticians about the importance and relevance of the idea of Aucitya or propriety in the creation of a good kāvya. It shows that the notion of propriety was an overarching concept in Sanskrit poetics, and literary theoreticians always insisted that creative writers should adhere to the rules of propriety. We should note that it was not only literary critics but poets also expressed this view. For instance, Mangha in his Shishupala Vatha compared the wisdom of a king choosing the right policy to that of a poet choosing the right style for his work. This is the essence of the literary concept of Aucitya. In the next video lecture, we will look at the various ways in which Aucitya functioned. I hope you have understood this lesson. Thank you.